So Zuhayeer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I feel like we've been doing a podcast the whole day today.
We have spent the entire day together up until this point. We have nothing left to talk about.
Yeah.
But you're the founder of Levels.fyi, which is one of the most referenced companies anytime someone talks about like trying to get a job in tech. And so, you know, when I went to school, every month, you know, all our friends would have the existential crisis around where they're going to get internships, trying to see who could get more, or like trying to see where they could maximize their TC. But you started this as a side project while you were in college, like almost like a couple of years ago now?
Yeah, it was like we started in 2017. So it's been like almost 7 years now. It's pretty crazy to think about, but yeah, it was like, and I was in college at the time. And yeah, it started off as a side project.
And even though it started as a side project, I know I can't say all the numbers, but you guys have, you know, gone well past your 1 million in revenue kind of benchmark. And you also have cracked the 1 million recurring monthly users benchmark. And so what was it like? What was the story when you were going from a side project that you started with a guy that you met and you were introduced to him because you both had similar names and you started a company together?
Yeah.
To then now having like a very well built out company.
I think, the story is always pretty funny, but I had a mutual friend at Berkeley. His name was Khwaja, who introduced me to Zuhayeer. My name is Zuhayeer. And the reason for that introduction was that you both have very similar names and you both like working on projects, so you guys should meet up. And so we met up. I met up with him at the Phils, like in South Bay, and we've been kind of working there since, which is pretty awesome. But we still go there like every now and then and kind of work out of there. But that was the first time I met Zuhayeer. I didn't know who he was. He went to UC Irvine. And turns out we actually grew up in the same place together. Like we were in kind of Cupertino area. He went to the same high school I did. We were just 4 years removed. And we very quickly hit it off. And at that time I was in college. And so I kind of wanted to ask him about kind of just general careers in tech as a fresh kind of graduate, like I wanted to know about what the industry was like. He was already working in industry, so he was at Amazon at the time. And so I wanted to understand like what, you know, the tech career would be like. And so, you know, one of my questions to him was, you know, what is pay like, or what is like, what is this software engineer role like? Because, you know, I want to be a software engineer. And so, you know, one of the first things he told me is like, there's varying levels of responsibilities in like, as like a software engineer, depending on your seniority and your level. And, you know, being a naive college student, I just didn't even know that there was like there was such thing as like levels. I thought it was just kind of everything is, you're just a software engineer. And, you know, that's what a lot of, kind of tools out there will have you believe is like, oh yeah, it's just like, that's the role. There's no like gradation or, you know, fluctuation within the role itself. And,
it's like, you know, once it's on your contract, you make 600,000 a year. That's it.
Exactly. That, like, okay, 600,000 stretch it. I thought it was like 100K, like that max at that time. I'm like, okay, that's like what you'll get. And that's what you go into industry with. And maybe you get like some promotion or bonus, but I didn't know that there was like an explicit structure for leveling. And so he was telling me that actually there's very explicit structure. And as you kind of go up in level, and in some companies, it's like, you either have to go up or you're out. Like, you know, you have to get to a career level, which is usually it's like 2 or 3 levels into kind of like a company's track. And if you don't hit that level, then it's like you didn't perform. And so you want to get to that career level. And so he was telling me that, okay, there's like, you know, you have your new grad level. From there, you go to like another level, and then you have the senior levels, and it can go up to like 8 or even more levels all across. And so that was all completely new to me. And very shortly after, you know, I kind of was looking this up, and he was sending me like all these Quora, like different kind of forums where this is referenced. And one of the biggest confusion points that we noticed that people had about levels in the industry was that no one knew what, you know, the leveling would translate to at another company if they were to switch companies. And so people, like, there were pockets of knowledge that people had, but it was very hard to know what level you should be placed at if you were to switch companies. And so Zuhayeer himself was facing this problem. What happened was he was going to switch to LinkedIn, and he wanted to confirm that the level that he was getting into at LinkedIn was actually representative of the level that he was at Amazon. And he had gotten promoted at Amazon, so he wanted to make sure that he was at the right level. And so that kind of gave us the light bulb for why not just create like a very simple way to compare levels across companies and just create like a very visual tool. And I joke about it now. It's almost like a PDF guide of where you can kind of expect to be when you switch companies. And so that's really how Levels started. Today we're known for like salaries and compensation information, but really it started with solving that problem of just mapping which level you would be at a different company. And so, you know, you can imagine all the permutations of questions you would see would be things like, I'm a Google L3, where would I end up at Microsoft or at Amazon? And so we kind of mapped that. We just talked to like our friends. We got like leveling rubrics from kind of around the industry, and it was a very manually curated effort in the beginning. And from there, we kind of started getting eyeballs onto the site and then getting more and more people just contributing leveling rubrics themselves.
So what was the first version of the site? What did it let you do?
Yeah, all you could do on the site was just view, like you had like a toggle to like basically add a company.
Okay.
And then you could just view the levels like at each company next to each other and what it would translate to if you were to switch.
And then how did you go about getting eyes on it?
A lot of our efforts were in the beginning was just putting things out on different forms, like these questions that I just told you about, like on Quora, Reddit, like Blind at the time, like we just answered those questions ourselves. And then very shortly after that, we noticed that people were basically sharing the website themselves. Like they were just putting it out as an answer. Whenever someone asked that question, we started seeing that question get like asked less and less over time. And I'm sure we had like some impact on that, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, like then it became like kind of like this de facto place. Like, okay, just go to Levels.fyi. No one's even answering the question. They're just like, go to Levels.fyi.
Yeah.
And that's how we started getting more and more company leveling rubrics, things like that as well.
I remember I would always send you the links on like the YouTube videos, because my friends would send me YouTube videos of like, oh, here's how to like get an internship at Apple. And they would always reference Levels. Or there were a few news studies where they would like reference Levels as like the economy's going down or the economy's going up.
Yeah.
None of those were planted. Like you never spent money on those like marketing.
I mean, we did our own marketing. So like, I mean, me and Zuhayeer would post all the time. We would have our own Levels account where we would try to post things, and even just media, just that eventually got into the hands of someone more influential, and then people would share it. But we never did paid marketing explicitly. We just felt like organic is the strongest way to grow. I mean, word of mouth is probably the number one metric that we were tracking. Is like, I mean, it's hard to track, but it's the only way that you really know you're building something worthwhile is like if someone's willing to share with their friend. And so that's really what made us like kind of shaped our product thinking, and like what we were building is like, how can we make this thing that people will definitely want to share with their friends?
So one thing that's interesting is I feel like a lot of people don't know that you guys have a monetization aspect, or that it's even like a full-blown company. But you guys have been monetizing almost since day one, right? So what did it look like early on?
Yeah, I'll give you like the kind of the path we took, and like we had like a bunch of different models and things we tried that took us to today. But today, like we have, I would say, 3 pillars to kind of our revenue side. And the first pillar is essentially we have the candidate side, where we help basically candidates increase their job outcomes. And that could be, you know, things from resume review, our negotiation service, and we have like different kind of levels to that as well. Like based on your seniority, you would be booking different packages there. And candidates love it, and it's been a great way for us to also just have a bird's eye view in the market. It allows us to know like who's hiring at this time, who's not hiring at this time, and then also just understand like what's going on and kind of build this like real-time knowledge base of how the market's performing and doing. And that's been extremely valuable. Now on the flip side, this has been more recent, but we've been working with companies on their employer branding and kind of just basically advertising their jobs, as well as compensation benchmarking. So the same data that you see on the site, we kind of put it into a format where compensation analysts can use it to kind of benchmark compensation within their organizations. And so that's been one of our fastest growing sides of the business, and we've been pretty excited about. And like to rewind back, I guess, to day one, we were actually pretty intentional about making revenue from like very early on. I think I was referencing how we started with leveling.
Right.
Very shortly after that, we basically started to collect data, compensation data around, but using leveling as kind of like this crux that people can also enter because we had that structured data. And we realized our salaries were way more accurate than anything else out there because we were collecting that leveling granularity. And so as we started to collect that, and this is kind of like our startup story with Levels.fyi, is like we started with a Google form. And so naturally a Google form feeds into like a Google sheet. And so we actually just published that Google sheet as like basically the site. So you would just come to the site and it would just be that Google sheet.
That was the whole site.
That was the whole site. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then very quickly we were like, wait, like people want more stuff. Like we want to do aggregations, more interesting things. And so that's when we were like, okay, let's use the Google Sheets as a backend, and we'll just put like some interface on top of it. And back then, like, there was Google Sheets was a little bit more open because I think now you have to do like auth or whatever. But back then you could literally change like a query parameter at the end of like the Sheets URL and just be like values like equals JSON or something, and it would just spit out a JSON. Yeah,
that's crazy. I didn't know.
And so like we literally just took that Google Sheet link and we would just be fetching it and just like populating our page. And it was completely open. Anyone could just take it, and it was that was just how we got started. And then from there, like as the load increased, the Google Sheet was slow. There was we had too much data points, and so we decided okay, what's like the next step we could take here? We weren't getting rid of the sheet anytime soon. It was more like, we were like, okay, now let's use like a Lambda function, call the sheet like, and get it all into like a JSON file. And we'll heavily cache that JSON file, like, or at least like refresh it maybe every 15 minutes or so. And so we did, and so that was like the next phase of kind of, our growth. It was like, okay, like you just had this massive JSON file. And then after a while, we're like, okay, this JSON file's not working anymore. We reached our 5 million cell limit on Google Sheets. Like we got to figure out like how we can do something like more sustainable. And that's really when we hopped over to like an actual database. But even before that, we tried things like sharding our Google like workspace into like multiple workspaces so that we can get like more than 5 million cells because of that limit. But yeah, that was a huge sidetrack from what we were talking about revenue. Right? Yeah. So revenue, we tried to be somewhat intentional about making like some revenue from like pretty early on.
Right.
And so very soon after we launched like salaries, we started basically advertising for this company called Triple White.
What do they do?
So they were basically like a recruiting firm for technical talent, but
interesting.
But they would like have their own vetting system. It's almost like you could think of it as like if you were Triple Byte accredited, you went through their like initial interview process, and so you had some level of accreditation or verification that you're a good engineer.
Okay.
And so we would funnel leads to them, and initially it was just pure advertising, or actually initially it was like we were doing like a model where we got some percentage of a person's salary if they were to actually land a job through that like funnel. But of course that would take like time. It would take like months to get that check or whatever. And so eventually we pivoted into like pure advertising. We were doing CPC, like a cost per click model where, they were just paying us some number of dollars like per click. And that way we could accommodate other advertisers who were not like, doing just purely recruiting. And so we kind of created this like semi marketplace of like just ads on the site. But and it was good revenue, and it allowed us to make the jump to full time, me and my co-founder. But soon after that, we were like, okay, we need, like, advertising is inherently, like, in some sense, you're selling yourself short because you're advertising some product that they're getting some more value.
You're funneling your own users' money into someone else's bank account.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, like, we wanted to capture more of that. And so that's when we decided to build out our negotiation service. And that was, I think around COVID, or maybe even a little bit before COVID, we decided to do our first kind of offering of the service. And that was just me and Zuhayeer, like, getting on phone calls and just, like, helping people out.
And so for context, you said that first kind of, like, bit of advertising is what let you guys go full time on it. How much were you making from that advertising for you to decide to go full time?
Yeah, I think we were making, like, something around 5 figures, like, annually.
Okay.
And it was enough just for us to be like, yo, like, this is draining most of our time anyway. And it's really fun.
Yeah. Okay.
Might as well just go full time.
Right.
And the revenue definitely made it easier. Don't get me wrong, because I feel like if we had zero revenue, maybe the equation would have been a little bit different.
Right.
But it was, like, obviously organically going off, like, we didn't have SEO at this time or anything. It was just kind of people spreading it by word of mouth, and we were getting great traction, and ad dollars were coming in. And so that made it a very, very easy decision for us to, hey, let's try this out. There's something here. Let's go full time. And I really encourage all my friends to kind of take that side project approach, just because I feel like when you make, like, a company formal or something formal, like, you end up becoming too formal, and you start thinking about, like, the details that don't matter, like the incorporation of the company,
the incorporation, the equity, the Slack workspace, all the stuff except for actually building the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so in the side project mindset, you're just purely focused on just doing the thing and having fun, because if you're not having fun, then why are you even doing this thing on the side? Like, and so, that's been, like, I think the greatest way, like we take a stepwise approach to everything. Like, okay, let's make our first dollar, get our first user. Okay, now let's make it $10, 10 users, and then keep going. And you keep doing that. And you see that with our Google Sheets story and, like, everything. Like, you just don't, like, I feel like it's very easy and very tempting to do, like, to take the approach of just, hey, I'm just going to go all in. I'm just going to raise like $100 million and just, actually put everything into this, like, venture. But I feel like just take it a step at a time, see how it goes. Like, just way more fun, I think, because you're not, like, putting all this, like, pressure on yourself.
Yeah, it's like manufactured pressure. It doesn't actually lead towards.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some people are just good about it. Like, some people can raise 100 million and just be like, yeah, whatever, and, like, still do their thing, and that's great. But, like, but we really like that stepwise approach. Just like, okay, hit that, then we do this, then we do that,
right?
And like, we unlock the thing after we actually get to the first step.
And so once it got to a point where you had a little bit of revenue coming in, did you guys raise money? Is this around the time that you did the round?
So no, the impetus for raising was to really build our team. It wasn't really, like, we were making money through our services. And that wasn't ad revenue at that point. It was, like, pretty much mostly service revenue, through our candidate, like, facing services. But we decided to build the team because, like, once again, like, going back to the stepwise function analogy, like, up until that point, I think me and Zuhayeer could handle everything. We were just, we were working like crazy, but, like, we were just like, okay, we got to handle this, we got to do this. And we were able to do it. But then when we got to, like, this point where we were making some money and we had ideas for product, we were limited by, like, the actual engineering hours we could, like, put in. And so that's when we were thinking about, okay, we need to build a team because we are, like, actually limited by the engineering hours we can put in and, like, what we're able to do and serve. And before that, it's not like, before that, our logic was we're actually limited by product, not engineering. Like, and so it was like, we just needed to build stuff. And so that's what we did until we hit the limit for that. And then we needed to build a team. And that's when we were like, okay, but what's our, like, main constricting factor? It was capital. And so that's when we were like, okay, makes sense to fundraise now because we need to build this team, and the main constraining factor is capital. It's not like anything else.
That makes sense. At what point did you shift from purely focusing on like the growth or the engineering to like focusing on company building? Or would you say
I don't think you ever shift away like completely from growth. Like, of course, that's like probably the most important thing about like a company and startup. But in terms of company building, I mean, I think once again, like we took like a very, very like stepwise approach. Like we hired our first engineer, and even that, like our hiring process, and I know a lot of startups do this, but we kind of did kind of this contract period where we just kind of tried the relationship out. That was like our first engineer. Then we hired them because we both mutually liked each other, and we thought it would be a great setup. But you know, he didn't have to leave his leave his company like prematurely. We just kind of decided to do that after, like we realized, okay, like you know, this is gonna work out. This is great. Like we like each other, and so from then on, like we were kind of like hired one by one, and even today, like we're like approximately 10 people. So it's like, you know, it's just kind of like we spaced it out. We made sure that we got into the swing of things with like the full team that we had, and then determined, okay, do we actually need something else, or can we just do everything? And it's like, I think the worst mistake you can make is like one, overhiring, and then two, I think, you hire the person, they do the job, and then maybe like 6 months later, you're like, wait, what do they do now? And it's like, if you don't properly think that through, then like you're not actually hiring, you're hiring reactively, not like more proactively.
That makes sense. Once you started to grow the team, at what point did you guys decide, okay, now we have enough firepower to make sure that the core product works and we're continually growing and you have the new services, but then suddenly you decided to build a mobile app? Where was that kind of like decision coming from?
The mobile app, we've actually had it out for a while. Like I think I mentioned to you, like it sucked. Like it just, and it was not great. Like people were giving us bad reviews the whole time. And you know, it's the Levels.fyi app, but you couldn't really go in it to view salaries. It was just like our community, and you could just see like posts and stuff like that, but you couldn't actually view salaries. And so, I mean, in some ways we were kind of pulled into it because we were like, okay, like people just hate our app. Like we should just go build a better one.
Yeah.
But then in other ways, it was also very strategic because, you know, re-engagement like is like a big thing. And I think having like some mobile presence just allows us to have like that funnel into users that have our app and are now more involved in our community. And I think I was mentioning to you in the car ride, like, you know, for like our website was completely like pretty much like open, like you could just like a buffet, like you could just go in and view everything. And you know, that was great. Like it was like, we literally gave you the Google sheet, like, you know, and then now, you know, now we want like people to be more involved in our community and like, and also just learn about all the benefits they get, like by getting emails from us, like whether that's like salary alerts, like, okay, this compensation increased, like it's very valuable for folks once they actually like get into the loop of these things. But you know, on web, like there's this huge hesitation around like signing up because I mean, generally these things are free, and I understand that. Like, and I think like people should have the ability. We're not gonna like lock down things, but like people should have the ability to do it. But with a mobile app, we want to make the mobile app more powerful so that it's attractive for people to download. But you know, like no one really questions signing up on like a mobile app as much. Like, what are like they're like most apps you're using, you signed up.
You kind of
like,
have to,
yeah. And no one really questions it. And so that's been like one of the big ways that we've been getting signups. And, you know, even an email for us is like very powerful because we can now re-engage that person.
It's cool that you guys, like, you know, the saying of every company needs to be up, or every startup needs to operate as a media company. You guys essentially did that. If I'm thinking about how you built your funnel, it was very much like information at the very top for free. And then you kind of charge for implementation, but like you built this super wide top of the funnel where people would come to like learn about, you know, whatever they wanted to learn about around Levels or getting a job. And then you would only charge them money to implement the things that you had already given them for free, basically. And then you also now have like the re-engagement things built in. It's almost like you have your own newsletter with now having the emails that you can continuously re-engage.
Yeah, no. I think that's pretty spot on. I think you'll be challenged to like find a company not thinking about that top of the funnel. Now, like even for enterprise companies, that top of the funnel is different. It's not like an end candidate or consumer, but everyone's thinking about top of funnel, right? Like you have to have some sort of distribution. And I mean, yeah, distribution is like another thing. Like for us, like, I mean, obviously started off with word of mouth, and that's how you know you're building something somewhat valuable. But after that, we still had to get like very strategic and like think about, okay, how do we actually scale this? And one of the metrics I really actually like thinking back to is when we hit 1 million clicks through Google search. And that's basically when 1 million people a month were clicking on one of our links with like a search. And the reason that's powerful is because Google is probably still, even with everything going on, like one of the biggest distribution channels there is ever. Like, and so that's naturally where people go and to find information. And so that was one of our biggest strategies, like to make sure that we're optimized for it. And I think back like in the day, right around when we were starting to grow, like our team, is when we noticed that there's this thing in Google search called, like, basically they have this thing called structured schema, which is like a series of different things that you can add as like meta tag attributes that Google would then use. Like, for example, when you search like a movie, you'll notice like movies are in like a special UI or UX, and so they're given like this different treatment, and because they have different structured schema like behind the web page. And so right around then, they had this thing called occupation schema, which had like a salary estimate like component. And so we jumped on that right away and made sure that we had that implemented. Smart. And before even like all the other like salary websites there are out there, like even knew about it, we were like on that, and that really greatly increased like our visibility on Google, which was great. Even today, I think if you like search Google salaries, I think you might have to be in the US or Canada or something like that. But if you search like Google salaries, you will see like a special UI at the top, like with a salary estimate.
No way.
Yeah. And it just made it much easier for people to find us.
So it feels like, you know, a year or two ago, the barrier to entry into startups became super low with AI, right? Like everyone was able to screen record a video of something that they built, and then their distribution was just posting a video on Twitter, and it would go viral every single time and generate a few $1,000s a month in revenue. I'm noticing, and I think you are too, like now the barrier to entry as far as like something that actually gains viral distribution is much higher. Those same demos that used to go viral 2 years ago on Twitter aren't going as viral as much. The same like, here's how to use ChatGPT like to make more money on Instagram videos aren't going viral the same way they used to. And I start to wonder now, what does the next layer of distribution look like? There are, I think Abe on our team was talking about trying to figure out how to get our own email for one of our products, how to get indexed into ChatGPT or how to get indexed into Perplexity. And so it's when you mentioned kind of like the structured schema, I started to think, what do you think the next layer of distribution looks like for specifically Levels?
I still think it's like direct. It's not like a proxy. Like a proxy by definition is like you're being undercut basically. Like when's the last time you clicked on like a link that I guess ChatGPT gave you as like an attribution?
As attribution? No, never.
Never, right?
Yeah, probably not.
So like, I mean, I feel like people are not going to click on that. That's not like a way that you are actually going to get distribution. I mean, it's fine that they use you as a resource. It's great. Like, I mean, if like you're actually getting recognized for it, but in terms of getting people to your actual product, like the fundamentals that I think about is like email, like website, mobile app, like, you know, like you have to have those things, like, and you have to be able to attract them to those things. And I mean, the way you attract them, I think can differ and you can be creative about, but ultimately you have to have like an SMTP server, like serving emails, like, you know, like, or like, and so I think that's what it is. It's like the direct things, like it goes back to like those fundamental things. And I guess if you take like a long-term view, Like a lot of products are flashes in the pan. And I mean, we're trying to be like around, like, you know, for a long time. And to do that, I think you need to think about the very fundamental things that like won't go away, you know?
You know, there's a thing we were talking about earlier today of like once now with Devin coming out earlier today, it's like creation will only get easier to the point where your only moat will be distribution until what was he said? He was like, yeah, until distribution GPT comes out and then you're screwed there too.
Yeah, no, I think, Devin's like super interesting, and I can't imagine like college kids are looking at that and going like, yay.
It's like they have no idea. Also, for context for the audience, do you want to explain it? There was a new startup that dropped today. It's called, well, the startup itself isn't called that, but there was a new product today that was launched on Twitter.
Cognition or something, Labs or something
Cognition
like that.
Labs, yes. Right. Yeah. And they launched Devin, which was basically a new AI specifically for coding. And instead of it being like a co-pilot that codes along with you, you can just tell it what to build and it'll go and build it for you. And supposedly it's better than Upwork engineers and had like a 13% accuracy rating on GitHub or whatever that means.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Like basically I saw like that it contributed to open source repos, and actually, you know, like I think contributed or fixed some issues or things like that. And it's pretty impressive because I think like it's like another layer of abstraction out where, you know, if you think about, I guess, Copilot and ChatGPT, that's like, okay, you're augmenting some like limited window of text and then you bring it back to your like code editor. Then Cursor was like, let's do the whole code editor, like. And so now you have like the whole code editor in context. And now I think with Devin, the idea is like, can we, you know, abstract even one layer further and just any applications you need, whether that's a browser, a terminal, a code editor, you can like use it and it can do things like with basically any resource.
Do you see that like tools like this and then further versions of tools like this negatively impacting the results that you'll have to display on your site?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I know what you mean now. It's like
our salaries going to go down?
Salaries may get compressed over time, especially if these things continue. Like, I don't know if basically, I think this is a direct attempt at like making engineering cheaper, right?
If you were a junior engineer, you should be worried right now, basically.
Yeah, and I don't know what like the time scale of it is, but I do think that a lot of these things that initially come out end up being like an augmentation force for existing engineers before it actually becomes, you know, the replacement. And we see that with self-driving, right? Like it's like we see lane assist or things that are helping the driver first. And then like we go to like a feature complete kind of solution. But I think as of right now, it just means like current engineers get more powerful. And especially if you can think in like as an engineer in the details already, like that is what you need for the this V1. Like you need to be able to think as an engineer. It's not like someone who's not like familiar with engineering at all can just go and do something. You have to have like some context and you have to know where to like, okay, maybe it doesn't like, you know, it's still 13%. Maybe it doesn't get something right. You need to know like, okay, where isn't it right? And be able to like debug it into like kind of like the weeds. That said, like, I think it'll only get better. So, you know, time will tell.
Time will tell. The market right now, it's not looking good. Like even, I think I told you earlier, like I had a bunch of friends who graduated school last year. They went to Berkeley, they graduated, they got their CS degrees, whatever.
Yeah.
And now they're coming to me and they're saying basically like, no luck finding a job. And now they're trying to find like 70, 80K a year in SF software engineer, like startup jobs basically that still have equity upside. But it's very different than like what we were told going into school. Cause when I was applying, which was like, I don't know, 2020, yeah, which is when I was applying. It was like, if you go into CS, this is your perfect shot at stability. Now, if you look at the actual market, the same people that told me that are now kind of looking at me like, oh, actually the stability that we talked about isn't there anymore. Unless you're like top 99th percentile.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, like I always look at these things as in like a different angle. Like this is now like an opportunity to really like, okay, you have no job prospects, then like go start something.
Time
like
to build.
It couldn't be a better time. The reason that you don't have a job is because it's just so easy to do this job, right? Then go do like some interesting things with those resources that you have at your disposal now. And so I feel like it's like a, reframed, like you can kind of think of it as an opportunity where people can go build like more than they could ever before in the history of like this like world.
And so if taking that example back now to Levels.fyi, if you guys had unlimited resources, like what do you plan for the product to look like over the next few years?
I mean, we want to build like the way that people can kind of almost reverse interview like a company. And the way that I think about that is today companies will hit like let's say you're a senior engineer. They'll kind of message you, or they'll like introduce the opportunity to you on LinkedIn, and you're kind of like hit with these requests, and then you like individually like consider it. But we kind of want to flip the script on that entirely. Like we want to give you the data and the information to be able to basically curate the companies that you want to work at. And that means like compensation is like a big thing. Like people care about compensation. And so, if you are not willing to go under like let's say 200K total comp, then you're not going to look at any opportunity for like that level that doesn't pay that amount or isn't available in your location. And so all of that stuff is like things we're allowing you to filter for and even set alerts up for, so that like what companies there are that you can find interesting. And compensation is not the end all be all. I think there are other things like that we want to be able to like give users the power to do, whether that's like benefits information or even information about leadership within a company. All of those things are things we want you to be able to basically toggle on and make like the best decision for yourself. Today, it almost feels like if you're a great engineer, it's like you have to become like you're pitched on like different things, but we want you to be just as intentional as these companies are when they're head hunting for you. And I think giving people the resources to do that is our ultimate goal. And why we're building our mobile app, to basically make it a very powerful resource for people who are looking for, jobs, and also just increasing their job outcomes. And like, whether that's negotiating, whether that's making sure that you are visible to the right companies, all of that, like in kind of one place.
And so you guys have built a very large company off of helping other people get jobs in tech. If I'm someone that wants to get a job in tech coming out of college, what's your advice to me as someone that wants to get into engineering?
Like today, being more comfortable doing things that are outside of like a traditional job description. And you'll be surprised how many people like even apply to like a job on Levels, and they'll just put the most basic stuff and or like it's like a copy paste of like, if you're not differentiating yourself in some way, then you're not going to like land a job, especially in this economy. Right. And so I think just being willing to like step out of your job description and see things from almost like, how can I solve this problem for this company? Like you can do a lot. And I think, especially if you're an engineer, like it's very tempting to go into this mindset of, oh, I need to become like a very cracked engineer, like really great, like just know everything about Rust, like B trees or whatever. Like, and if you reframe that and think about like, instead of making that your goal, can you make the goal like, for example, I really like find a few companies you really want to work at, and then genuinely see how you can like solve the problems that they are solving, and like if you can even augment their product. Like one creative thing that I always think helps is literally build something off of like, whether it's from scratch or whether it's like an auxiliary thing, like to like a company, just build it and send it to like the founder and say like, hey, I've been thinking about this, and I came up with this solution. Like, let me know if you'd have like a few minutes to chat. And I feel like it's a great way to just get into the founder's inbox. And I mean, I'm just telling you from my experience, like I love seeing emails like that because like it piques my interest and it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, building side projects too is just now more than ever, like you said.
Yeah. I think showing agency is like one of the biggest things you could do. Like if you're confined to your role, like then like there's nothing else you have to offer. Like basically it's like filling a position. And so you're like, the minute someone else is willing to do it for less, then then it's like game over. But if you don't like mold to a job description, you're doing X, Y, and Z and finding ways to like help the company in this dimension, or like also just helping, like just doing things, like that don't just mold to what you're told to do. I think you can accomplish a lot and you'd make a lot of people happy. You'll have institutional knowledge by the end of like the thing. It's like, oh yeah, we can't even get rid of this guy. He like
he's too built in.
Yeah,
he's too built into the system.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, making yourself valuable like that, I think is just another frame of thinking. And I think I mean, anyone could do it. You just have to like put the effort in.
When you first built the site, it was like on Google Sheets and it was just very kind of like hacked together.
Yeah.
Is it still built on Google Sheets? Like what's the site running on now?
We are now a little bit more robust than that, but I mean, previously we were basically, actually our homepage, if you go to it, is literally HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we literally use jQuery to basically power the site. No frameworks, like just raw jQuery. And it works. And it powered us for a long time. And the next kind of step that we took was, I mean, we were basically trying to generate a lot of pages. And so we kind of chose Next.js to kind of, and like they have like this pretty sweet SSR kind of system where you can kind of regenerate these static pages. But even now with Next.js, like most of our pages are all like static. And so they're just statically generated at some interval and then just pushed out. And that's the beauty, I think, of our system. It's like a very read heavy system, like not as much writing. And so it's like you just cache, like literally caching does so much wonders. Like for our like AWS bill, it's like pretty insane. You just cache this thing like over and over and distribute it. Like, and for the most part that works. We have like a few components that help with like real time kind of information, like salaries coming in, things like that. But that's pretty much like our stack. And I mean, Google Sheets we still use. I mean, I would say less as like a source of truth today because we now have the Postgres database, but more as like an interface to actually like look at the data, crunch it, slice it in different ways. And so we actually have a tool internally where we would take like we could select like a subset of our data and then export it to Google Sheets so we can like actually like wrangle with it. Because it is like a great interface for that. Even like today for our enterprise customers, we literally give them a Google Sheet with like individual data points. People are familiar with it because people are familiar with Google Sheets, and so it's just like such an easy hack for us to do so much. Like you don't need to rebuild that; like it's already there. And so, I mean, we're huge fans of like making like decisions like that to cut like, our timelines in not even half, like into 1/10 of like what it would have taken,
So someone had sent me a DM recently and they said they had watched the podcast, but they wanted to know if anyone was hiring. And so moving forward, I told them I was going to start asking all of my guests if they're hiring and what they're hiring for. So I know we talked a little bit about your guys' team right now. What are the roles that you're looking to fill?
Yeah, we have one role open today. Like we just hired like an engineer, and I think we're good on that front. But we're hiring for a sales role today. I think it's, if you go to Levels.fyi/careers, you should find it. You can apply. We have like the compensation information there. But we are really looking for like a full stack sales, like BDR/AE, like person who can kind of take on like, leads as well as kind of just demos and even just managing clients, like the full stack really. And someone who's ready to kind of hit the pavement hard, like, and just go for it.
All right. So my last question before we wrap things up, if we were to do this podcast again in a year, what would you have want to accomplish before then to consider the last year a success?
Yeah, I think we want to 10x everything. Like we literally want, I mean, ideally, like, like past 8 figures revenue. And then, we would also want, I think, broader coverage of the roles that we have today. And so one of the big projects for us is, just broader taxonomy of job roles and just titles that are out there, and then along with that, internationalization, which means that we have like a deeper presence in the rest of the world. Today, we're very focused on the US. I want to say like Canada, Europe, Australia, India as well. But I want, like, in terms of actual numbers, like, we should be like a representative sample of the actual world and engineers around the world. And I think if we can do that, I think we've done a good job of that in the US, actually. Like, we have a representative sample of where in the US engineers are, and like how much they get paid. But we want to do that for the world.
Fire. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.